Police officers who have arrested other police officers. What happened? My girlfriend Celia and I had been dating for about 6 months when she finally invited me to meet her parents. She told me not to be nervous because her brother-in-law, Lorcan, was going to be there. He was supposedly a cop just like me, so we'd have plenty to bond over. I was honestly relieved to have a fellow brother in blue at the table. We arrived at the family dinner, exchanging hugs and handshakes, when Lorcan finally walked in. For some reason, he was wearing his full police uniform to a casual family gathering. I thought it was a bit weird, but some guys just love the badge. However, when I got a closer look at his uniform, my instincts kicked in. His police insignia looked incredibly cheap, like something you'd pick up at a Halloween pop-up shop, not department-issued metal. I brushed it off, thinking I was just being overly critical. We sat down to eat, and halfway through the meal, Lorcan started bragging about his job. He loudly mentioned handling a really dangerous 1070 call the week prior. My stomach dropped. A 1070 isn't a life-threatening emergency. It's the dispatch code for an illegally parked car. Then, his mom chimed in, talking about how proud she was and how many family vacations they've canceled because Lorcan was out saving lives. His dad shook his head and said it was an absolute tragedy how underpaid officers are, mentioning they've had to lend Lorcan money multiple times just to cover his basic bills. None of this was adding up. If this guy had actually been on the force for 7 years, he'd be making at least 80 grand a year. He wouldn't need handouts from his parents. I decided to test him. I complained about how ridiculous the union dues were getting this year. Any real cop would instantly launch into a massive rant about department politics. Lorcan just gave a blank stare, nodded, and said, "Yeah, it's crazy." Then Celia proudly mentioned that Lorcan practically lives at the station, pulling 30 to 40 hours of overtime every single week. I almost choked on my drink. Absolutely no sergeant on earth is approving that much overtime unless there's a state of emergency. I excused myself to the bathroom, pulled out my phone, and ran his full name through the state database. When the search finished, I felt sick to my stomach. There was zero record of him ever being a police officer. Anywhere. I walked back to the dining room right as Lorcan clinked his glass with a fork. The room went quiet. He smiled and announced, "I actually just got promoted to detective last month." The whole family erupted in cheers. My blood boiled. I couldn't sit there and watch this family get bled dry by a con artist. I looked right at him and said, "I just ran your name in the system, Lorcan. You aren't a cop. You never have been." The entire table went dead silent. He tried to laugh it off, telling me to chill and accusing me of being jealous of his promotion, so I laid it all out. "Let's play a game, Lorcan. You claimed you worked a dangerous 10 to 70. That's a parking violation. You claimed 40 hours of overtime. That breaks department budget policy and would get a supervisor fired. And that badge on your chest is a cheap piece of costume plastic. You've been lying to your parents for years just to steal their money." The color completely drained from his face. He had absolutely nothing to say. Celia started crying, demanding to know where he actually was during all those night shifts. He finally broke down and confessed everything. For the last 4 years, every single time he put on that fake uniform, he was actually driving straight to the casino. He had a crippling gambling addiction, and every dollar his parents loaned him was lost at the tables. The mother covered her mouth in horror, and the father just stared blankly, completely shattered. The night ended with me arresting my girlfriend's brother-in-law for fraud and impersonating a police officer right there in the dining room.